My family lost our ancestral home to a forged deed scam worth $50,000. When we discovered who orchestrated it, the betrayal cut deeper than we ever imagined. My name is Thaddeus Whitmore. I'm 71 years old and I've been the custodian of our ancestral home since my father passed in 1987. The Gothic Revival mansion was built by my great-great-grandfather Cornelius in 1863, a textile fortune that survived the Civil War, the Great Depression, and 2 world wars. I called my wife Cordelia immediately. "Darling, you need to see this," I said, my voice trembling as I held the collection notice. The document claimed we had taken out a reverse mortgage in 2014 for $50,000. It included photocopies of what appeared to be our signatures on loan documents, property transfers, and notarized affidavits. The problem was simple. We had never signed any of these papers. Cordelia examined every page with her magnifying glass, the same meticulous attention she'd used cataloging our family's historical documents for decades. "This isn't your signature, Thaddeus," she said firmly. "And this certainly isn't mine." The forgery was sophisticated but not perfect. Whoever had done this knew our full legal names, our address, even our social security numbers. But they had missed crucial details, the distinctive flourish in my capital T, the way Cordelia always crossed her lowercase t's twice. That afternoon, I drove to the county courthouse and requested copies of all recent filings on Whitmore Manor. What I discovered made my blood run cold. According to official records, we had deeded our home to Ravencrest Properties LLC in September 20. The deed transfer showed our signatures witnessed and notarized by someone named Rebecca Sterling, a notary I had never encountered. 6 weeks later, Ravencrest had secured the reverse mortgage using our property as collateral. 4 months after that, they had defaulted on the loan and the house had been foreclosed upon by Aldridge Banking Corporation. Our family's 5-generation legacy now legally belonged to a bank in Delaware that had never set foot on our property. I sat in my vehicle in the courthouse parking lot, staring at the documents that showed how someone had systematically stolen our ancestral home using nothing but forged paperwork and official stamps. If you're watching this thinking it could never happen to you, hit subscribe, because what we discovered next shows just how vulnerable every homeowner really is, especially those with valuable properties. The first clue came when I researched Pinnacle Legacy Holdings. The company had been registered in Nevada 2 months before our deed transfer, with a business address that led to a mail forwarding service in Henderson. The registered agent was listed as Marcus Caldwell, but when I called the phone number on file, it had been disconnected for months. Cordelia suggested we hire an attorney immediately. Victoria Blackwood specialized in elder fraud and real estate crimes with a reputation for taking on complex cases against institutional defendants. "This is becoming epidemic," she said after reviewing our documentation. "Deed fraud targeting elderly homeowners with valuable properties costs Americans billions annually, but most victims never recover their homes." She explained the sophisticated nature of modern property theft. Criminals research public records online, targeting homes owned outright by elderly residents with substantial equity. They forge deed transfers to shell companies, then leverage the stolen properties for legitimate loans. The banks often foreclose before the real owners discover what happened, Victoria explained. By then, sorting out the legal complexities can take years and cost hundreds of thousands in legal fees. She accepted our case on contingency, but warned us the process would be lengthy and emotionally draining. Meanwhile, we continued receiving aggressive debt collection notices, and our property taxes had been redirected to Aldridge Banking Corporation. 3 weeks later, Victoria called with disturbing information. "I've traced the notary who supposedly witnessed your signatures," she said. "Rebecca Sterling lives in Phoenix. I contacted her yesterday." "What did she say?" "She claims she's never been to your state, never notarized any documents for Ravencrest Properties LLC. Someone used her credentials fraudulently, along with a forged stamp. The investigation was expanding beyond simple property theft. Whoever had orchestrated this wasn't targeting just our family. They were operating a sophisticated criminal enterprise involving multiple false identities and stolen professional credentials. That evening, Cordelia found me in our library surrounded by family photographs and historical documents. 5 generations of Whitmores had called this house home, from Cornelius's daguerreotypes to our grandchildren's digital portraits. "We're going to reclaim what's ours," she said, taking my hand. "This house belongs to our bloodline." I wanted to share her confidence, but every day brought new complications. The debt collectors became increasingly threatening. Legal fees were mounting exponentially. And somewhere unknown, the criminals who had stolen our legacy were probably targeting other vulnerable families. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Our groundskeeper, Jameson Hartwell, mentioned seeing an unfamiliar man photographing our property the previous autumn. Said he was from the county assessor's office updating property records, Jameson recalled. But something felt wrong. He was more interested in architectural details than standard assessment measurements. Jameson had noted the vehicle's license plate, a habit from his military service. Victoria traced the registration to a rental company in Boston. The rental agreement led us to Bradley Morrison, a 38-year-old with an extensive history of real estate fraud across multiple states. But Bradley Morrison was merely a hired accomplice. Security footage from the rental agency showed him meeting with someone in their parking lot, someone whose face was partially obscured by a wide-brimmed hat but whose bearing seemed strangely familiar. I enhanced the footage using software my grandson had installed on my computer. The image was grainy but clear enough to recognize the distinctive way this person carried themselves. The man who had orchestrated the theft of our ancestral home was Percival Whitmore, my own nephew. The recognition hit like a physical assault. I stumbled backward, gripping the desk for support as the room seemed to spin around me. This was impossible. This couldn't be real. But there he was on the screen, clear as daylight, coordinating the systematic destruction of our family's legacy. Percival, my late brother's youngest son, had always been the family's financial disappointment. Multiple failed business ventures, gambling addictions, constantly requesting loans from relatives he never repaid. But I never imagined he would steal the house where he'd spent countless childhood summers, where we'd taught him to ride a bicycle in the same hallways his great-great-grandfather had built with his own hands. Cordelia found me sitting in our morning room at dawn, staring at the enhanced photograph. "You're certain it's Percival?" she asked softly. I nodded, unable to speak. Everything crystallized now. Percival had unrestricted access to our home as a family member. He knew our complete legal names, social security numbers, banking information. He had access to family documents stored in our private study. Most importantly, he understood we rarely monitored property records or checked credit reports regularly. We had trusted him implicitly. The confrontation occurred at Percival's apartment downtown. Victoria advised against meeting him alone, but I needed to hear the truth directly from his mouth. Percival answered the door in expensive clothes that seemed inconsistent with his supposed financial struggles. When he saw me, his face drained of color. "Uncle Thaddeus," he said, forcing a smile. "What brings you here so early?" "We need to discuss Whitmore Manor and Ravencrest Properties, LLC. His coffee mug slipped from his grasp, shattering on the marble floor. I handed him a copy of the enhanced photograph. He stared at it for an eternity, then collapsed into a leather chair. "How much do you know?" he asked quietly. "Everything. The forged deed, the reverse mortgage, the shell company, all of it." Percival covered his face with both hands. "I was desperate, Uncle Thaddeus. The gambling debts. They were threatening my life." "So you stole our family's legacy?" "I plan to reverse it," he said, avoiding eye contact. "The scheme was to sell the property quickly, pay off the mortgage, transfer the deed back. You would never have discovered anything." but you defaulted on the loan. The real estate market collapsed. The house appraised for less than the mortgage balance. Everything unraveled. I studied my nephew, truly studied him. The same Whitmore features I'd watched develop from childhood. The same boy who'd played hide-and-seek in the corridors of the house he'd stolen. 5 generations of our family's history, Percival. Our ancestral legacy, and you sold it to pay gambling debts. He began weeping then, devastating sobs that convulsed his entire body. I understand what I've done. I know I can't repair it. No, I said, standing, but you will try. The legal resolution required 14 additional months. Percival cooperated completely, providing comprehensive documentation about the fraud operation and testifying against his criminal associates. Bradley Morrison was apprehended in Florida and charged with multiple counts of interstate real estate fraud. The notary whose credentials had been stolen assisted federal prosecutors in building their case. Aldridge Banking Corporation, confronted with irrefutable evidence of the fraudulent mortgage, agreed to a settlement that restored our legal ownership of Whitmore Manor. But the damage transcended mere paperwork. Family gatherings became tense, uncomfortable affairs. Percival served 27 months in federal prison, and upon his release, he relocated to California. We haven't communicated since. The silence speaks volumes about trust once broken and family bonds severed by greed. 8 months after regaining legal ownership of our ancestral home, I installed a comprehensive security system and enrolled in property monitoring services. I review our credit reports monthly and maintain copies of every official document in a bank safety deposit box. Whitmore Manor remains ours legally and completely. But something irreplaceable was lost, the simple faith that family will protect what matters most to our shared heritage. Last Christmas, Cordelia and I hosted dinner for our children and grandchildren. As I watched the younger generation play in the same rooms where I'd played 70 years earlier, I felt profound gratitude for what we'd preserved. But I also felt profound sadness for what we'd lost. Not merely money or time, but the fundamental belief that some betrayals are simply inconceivable. The truth about family is complex and painful. Blood doesn't guarantee loyalty, and sometimes the people closest to you are capable of the most devastating harm. But it also means that some legacies are worth fighting for, even when the battle costs more than you ever imagined possible to pay.